Good afternoon for anybody who is just tuning in and joining us today. I am delighted to be joined by Dave Pounds. Dave and I met through a mutual friend, but we have a passion and a joined up want and wish to try and help other people. We've both got an individual story, but Dave, you touched me when we first spoke, and I found a little bit more about what you were doing through as an individual. And if I may, I'd just like to start by sort of asking you to do a quick few minutes summary, because what you actually went through and what you've been through is super important for you to share, and I would really like other people to hear a little bit from you, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Alex. So I'll try and sum up a lifetime in, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes. So I guess, if you looked at Dave Pounds from the outside world, you might see a guy who's, had a great life, really, good career, lots of friends, fabulous family, played lots of sport. If you then take it to the next sort of step that some people do sometimes, nice house and car and so on, it all looks fairly rosy, but behind the scenes and largely unspoken for many years was the growing impact of PTSD. I mean, when I was a kid, I don't think PTSD was even a label. But that PTSD was just getting stronger and stronger and stronger throughout my 20s, 30s, and 40s, to the point where it landed me in a whole heap of trouble, really. Now, the backstory to that was, and it's a long time ago, but this just shows how the ripple effect can sort of last for many, many years. But when I was 12 years old, and apologies if this is shocking for some of the viewers or listeners, my mum, in our very middle England house, was trying to help a colleague at work. My dad should have been there, but wasn't, because there was a problem with transport. He wasn't back from work. And this guy mum was trying to help took the offer of help to mean something else, and he sort of tried it on with her in terms of sexual advances, and she turned him down. He just went ballistic, and there was a 3-hour period one evening in our house where he murdered her. He raped her as well, and if it wasn't for sort of pretending to be asleep in my bedroom when he came upstairs, then I probably would have gone the same way. A few hours later, when Dad got home, I ran downstairs to let him in, because he couldn't get in because the key was on the inside of the kitchen door that we always used. I let him in the front door, and we discovered, frankly, a horror scene. The man got arrested within hours and was sent to prison for life. I'm sure he would have been out a long time ago. But back in the day, Alex, we had no clue how to deal with such an event. So the choice we made was, I was with the CID at 3 a.m. in the morning and back to school the next day. And the next time I spoke to my dad about it, I was in my mid-30s and beginning to have all sorts of problems. So that's the backdrop to what's brought us here today, I think. And
It's
a journey on.
It is 100%. What's brought us here to begin discussing, because I was listening, and it's the second time I've heard the story, and it basically, I just couldn't even imagine it. But there was a couple of things that really stood out to me, and I think it's key for people who are listening that nobody knows from the outside looking in what is going on for anybody. What is going on for anybody? Anybody, we are very similar that to the outside world, pretended everything was absolutely fine, and showed no sign of weakness, no sign of any round the edges, but realistically your trauma was very different to my trauma, and a very different type of trauma. But I always say that it doesn't matter what type of trauma that each individual goes through, it's how that person deals with it, handles it. And I think you really touched on a poignant point, that you didn't know how to deal with it, and that you were that little boy who then kept it all inside, didn't process any of it. And, the next time you spoke to your dad about it was 20 years later. And it's like, all those feelings and thoughts and trauma that have been suppressed, and pushed down into our bodies. And, it's emotions have a massive effect on your body. And I've learned that myself over the last 5 years of, all the work I've done on myself from being in my various rehabs. So I think it's so poignant for people to realize that anybody could have anything going on at any one time, and nobody quite knows what somebody else is going through, or what somebody else is having to process, or maybe haven't processed, or maybe what could have affected them when they were younger, or any of these type of things. And this is why I wanted to do this with you today, because not only have you got an amazingly powerful story, but also I would hope that for a few people listening to this, it would give them the encouragement to be able to be vulnerable about anything that they might not have dealt with, anything that they might have pushed, to one side, and to begin to maybe, question, is that affecting their lives? And is it having a knock-on effect to how they behave, or how things are going on for them in their personal lives at the moment? So firstly, I'd like to say thank you for being vulnerable, and for actually, agreeing to speak about it, because it certainly wasn't an easy situation for you to go through. And I would imagine I'm going to ask you to sort of tell us a little bit about how detrimental it got, how bad things got, from not dealing with it. What was the sort of overall picture looking like?
Yeah, well, I agree with all that you've said. I remember watching a guy called Richard McCann give a talk once, and he said, look, you never quite know what's going on in people's lives. They don't stick a badge on themselves at the start of the day saying, I'm feeling this, or this happened to me. And that makes me think, it reminds me of that old saying, which I think came from the Bible, which is, before you point out the speck of a splinter or the speck of a dust in somebody else's eye, why don't you focus on removing the plank from your own eye? We're quick to judge sometimes, aren't we, without knowing the full story. In terms of rock bottom, I've probably been there a few times, really, and I've given up alcohol before, but made the mistake of complacency, thinking I've cracked this. I'll be different next time. I'll just have the odd one here or there. But the fact of the matter is, whilst my body was stuck in fight or flight, in a constant state of hypervigilance, whether I'm playing sport or working hard or look fairly relaxed, that's the state of the body. And it was so easy, even for 3 or 4 drinks, to be had every day. So if I drink, I was drinking every day, and only 3 or 4 would just drop your shoulders a bit and make you feel a bit more mellow and relaxed. And it's a lovely feeling. And in a way, alcohol's brilliant at doing that. But for me, what I've learned is alcohol compromises your nervous system. It compromises your nervous system physically. I mean, you and I will probably know people who are generally emotionally quite strong and resilient, but if they've had a long weekend, away and on the drink, then they often say Monday morning they're a bit jittery and a bit shaky, and that's alcohol compromising your nervous system. Well, for me, it was just basically laying a fertile ground for one of the old ghosts to come back, and on that fertile ground, it would blow up. And when it blows up, it blows up. So the adrenaline and the fear take me right back to being 12 years old, stuck in my bedroom, not really knowing what was going on downstairs, but knowing something bad was going on, especially when the perpetrator had been up to my bedroom, leaning over me, panicky breathing, checking if I was awake. And 2 hours of being stuck in bed like that before my dad came back seared this emotional memory into my mind and my body. As you said, we know the body holds trauma now. So that fertile ground created by alcohol just allows a thought to explode. So when it explodes, the adrenaline, the fear are so overwhelming and so claustrophobic. Yeah, you can talk to people. Yeah, you can try and focus on some work or a task, but actually, you're unable to focus on anything. You're unable to sleep. I've been for a week without sleep, not 1 minute. I've been for a week without one thing to eat, just drinking water and forcing the odd yogurt down, but gagging at the same time. Such is the power of the adrenaline. So what happens then is you turn to alcohol. Oh, sorry, I did. And before I know it, I'm 3 or 4 weeks into 2 or 3 litres of vodka a day. Every waking moment, if I wake up at 5 in the morning, I'm downstairs, pint, half vodka, half juice, throw that down just to take the edge off, fill it up again and sit in front of the TV. And then the day goes on. And over, day by day, everything crashes down, your nervous system. I've been in hospital twice where I could only walk with a Zimmer frame. Maybe 6 weeks before, I'm playing football with kids half my age. So the impact is quick and catastrophic. So the third time through that rock bottom, I thought, don't get complacent again. And I think a turning point was, well, 2 things. My daughter wrote to me in rehab, and it was a wake-up call, Alex, that this isn't all about you, mate. There are other people involved, and you are helping destroy. This is getting me now. You're helping destroy other people's lives, people who you care about, who you should be caring for, and people who care for you. And I think the next thing was my dad came to see me in hospital. He was, in his 80s at the time, and he left, and I was on this trolley in the hospital, and he just shook his hand out, put his hand out to shake mine, and said, "Come on, Dave, I want my best mate back." And that was powerful. That was really powerful. I mean, bizarrely, when he put his hand in mine and said, I almost thought he was going to say, "I want my drinking partner back." But he didn't. So I think that was the lowest point and the start, really, of the climb back up to where I am today. And I've never felt better physically, and emotionally.
Yeah, listen, I resonated with so much of what you were saying then about, that your family, basically your daughter, your dad, it gave you a different perspective on things. But I also resonated with the fact that you were using alcohol to cope. And I think for anybody listening, that can be them. That can be anybody, whether you're using it you've had a long week at work and then you end up drinking, just over the weekend, you're using alcohol to cope. You have a bad day at work, you're using alcohol to cope, and you made a very powerful point that it creeps up on you. You know, it does creep up on you, because mine was, I was having a bottle of wine a night, then mine became 2 bottles of wine a night, then it became 3 bottles of wine, and then it was vodka as well. And all of a sudden, it didn't just happen overnight, it was progressive. But the more that I was suppressing stuff and the more that I was running away from stuff, the more I needed larger amounts of the alcohol to be able to carry on suppressing it. And it is a progressive illness.
Did you? I wrote about alcohol on LinkedIn this morning, and because a few people have asked me recently, what is the one thing that's made the biggest difference? And the fact that we'll get onto this, I'm sure. The fact of the matter is, it wasn't one thing, and thinking one thing is the path to recovery or healing of trauma, I think, is generally a mistake. But I said, if you pushed me, I would say being teetotal is the foundation that everything else can be built on. But in the post, Alex, I said, people, I think a lot of people are in denial that their drinking isn't a problem. Have you heard people say, well, I go to work, or I have a few days off here and there, or I only drink beer, I can't be an alcoholic, and the list of other similar things, just convincing themselves there isn't the problem. But for me, the big test is, intellectually, would you like to see what it was like to go a month or 3 months or 6 months without a drink? And a lot of people will say yes, or even a day. A lot of people would say yes. And I guess the test is, do they then do that? Because if you don't, you might argue that that's a problem already.
Yeah, and to be fair, I've heard a couple of things recently where somebody challenges and says, if you don't think you've got an issue, have a week without something, whether it's alcohol, whether it's chocolate, whether it's, something that is basically got a power over you, or you're using as a coping mechanism. And for me, it's not just whether it's alcohol, whether it's alcohol, drugs, food, you can basically choose anything, to basically use as a coping mechanism. And many people do.
Yeah.
I think you're totally right that there's so much of it that goes on within the work culture, within the workforce. And this is where I think it's so powerful for me to start discussing it around the work environment, because we've both, been relatively successful. We've both, basically done fairly okay for ourselves in terms of a work story. But we've both had this big adversity, and we've both had this big challenge. And if I'm honest, we are two of the lucky ones that have managed to turn things around, because there is a lot of people that aren't able to turn it around. And I fully understand how easy it would be not to be able to turn it around, because turning it around for me is probably the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I openly admit that. It is incredibly difficult. So for those people that are still stuck at the end of the road and can't turn it around, I understand, because it is so difficult. But what I think both of us are joined up about is that we are wanting to help prevention, not to cure, because it's a lot easier to work with people, to be advising businesses, to be actually inspiring others as people are on their journeys of life, than when they get to the end of the road. And this is something that I am super passionate about, because and the only way that things can be broken down, and companies will start to actually realize that instead of ticking boxes, they need to be investing time, money, effort into actually the well-being of their staff, finding out, is by breaking down these stigmas that actually, people are going to have challenges in their lives. People are going to have traumas that they've gone through. People are going to have, things that basically will affect them significantly. And it could be losing a family member. It could be, a multitude of different things that will have an effect on people. And it's, for me, I feel like over the last 10 to 15 years, as a country, we've got pretty good on average at looking after ourselves physically, and all knowing that basically doing, exercise, walking, exercise, whatever it is good for us. And the next chapter, I believe, is over the next 10 years that we need to start understanding and be able to look after ourselves mentally, because mental health is huge. And I think you made the really powerful point a second ago about that people don't think that alcohol's, the problem, but alcohol is just used as a coping mechanism. And sadly, once you're using something to cope and to be able to get through everyday life, you take that away, and it's incredibly difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, is alcohol a bad thing completely? I don't think so. I think if you really can control it and it's not harming your mind or your body, and you enjoy the different flavors and tastes and that sort of mellowing, then maybe that's okay. I think it can help loosen up and start conversations sometimes. But that might only need half a glass of wine or a glass of wine. But it's just interesting what you say about my view of humans is the mind runs the show. So if I talk about physical and emotional wellness, the mind has to be right first. And I think you're right. I see humans as on a scale of 1 to 10 with their physical health and their emotional health. And we're all floating up and down between 1 and 10, depending on what we're doing and what's going on in life. Some things we can control and some things we can't. And we are much more, whether we're fitter now than we were 50 years ago, I think that's highly debatable. But I agree with you, we're certainly much more aware about physical fitness and how to develop that. But let's not get into the food industry and all that type of thing.
You could be there all day, couldn't you? You could
We
be
could,
there.
but it's great. You get to the office, or you meet people for coffee or in your local sports club, and they're telling you about the squash, the running, the yoga, the Pilates, the spinning, and how they're basically nudging up their dial towards 10 for their physical health. But where's the conversation about your emotional health and what you're doing to get near a 10 and far away from 1 as you can? And I don't think we have those conversations, but we need to be having them, and that's partly what you and I are talking about today. And I think I believe, because it's worked for me, that nudging yourself up close to 10 is entirely possible. Doesn't have to cost a fortune. I don't think you have to travel very far, and you don't need to employ over expensive experts.
Yeah, and this for me, the whole purpose of what I do with Clarity and why I wanted to basically do Clarity in the first instance is about providing choice. About providing choice, because not one size fits all, not one thing works for everybody. And if we can basically find enough choices and highlight and shout about enough different choices that are out there, then each individual is empowered to basically do their own research, to test, try, choose what it is that works for them as an individual, and find the best way of getting the best version of themselves. Because I am not going to sit here and tell anybody else what to do, because I think you'll agree with me that it's about empowering people, to find what works for themselves. Because I think you made a great point before when you said people ask you what is the one key thing, and there wasn't actually one key thing, it's a multitude of different things. But your multitude of different things is different to what my multitude of different things has been. and what somebody else's multitude of different things has been would be completely different again.
Yeah.
But what I love is that you have took all your trauma, all your learnings, and now you have set something new up, and you are wanting to get out there, help others, work with other people, work with companies, work with individuals. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing, what it's called, and I'm very excited for it because I think it's an amazing thing. And for me, if you can help 10 people, that's amazing. If you can help 100 people, that's even better. If you can help 1,000 people over the next 7 years, truly amazing. So tell us a little bit more about what it is you're doing, what it's called, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that, and I'll try to be brief again. But in essence, the one thing I've never done is stopped looking for answers. So my starting point was when this first blew up. I think I was 19. And remarkably, no real impact between 12 and 19. I still haven't found a rational answer for why the PTSD was dormant for so long. But I went to the doctors 3 times in a week. I felt desperate. I wasn't sleeping, eating, and I just felt rotten. And after the third time, he said to me, I could tell he was getting pissed off with me, and he said, "To be honest, Mr. Pounds, you're going to have to pull yourself together." And I thought, well, if only I'd thought of that. But the fact of the matter is, the mental health services are still limited today and fairly ineffective. That's the way of it. A psychiatrist I got to know quite well summed it up in a TED talk by saying, psychiatry is where conventional medicine was 100 years ago, before penicillin and before antibiotics. Very good at diagnosis, not very good at treatment. So, my search for answers took me to over 60 therapists, 3 dozen or more therapies, and left me with nothing much in the way of progress. So, without going into lots more detail, where I've ended up is working out a whole bunch of things that helps me, and that has led to creating a program called Design for Life, which has got 35 different modules in it. If somebody was to work through the Design for Life program, I think there are probably 7 or 8 modules which all of us should go through, and the rest are more a pick and mix, as you said, to suit the person going through it. Everything in it is stuff that's helped me, so I know it's work. I know it works. I've lived it. I've tested the essence of that with keynote talks, and I've tested that with one-to-one coaching and some workshops with businesses and schools. And the feedback, I couldn't have written better myself. So I'm really encouraged about its impact, and I know it works, and it is quite different from the normal protocol, which is psychotherapy, EMDR, or CBT, or acupuncture or hypnosis, or one of a million other things. I think the recovery from addiction, or the healing from trauma, or basically just having a good life, is based in a collection of things. I have my view, and that's Design for Life, and there's 39 modules. There might be 37 in 2 months, there might be 41 in a year, because that's life, isn't it? We're all learning and on a journey. And as I find things that are new, I'll stick them into the program. So I think, just to summarize then, I think who would come to Design for Life? I think the 3 main things that it will help with is making peace with the past. At the other end of the scale, finding your unique purpose. Your unique purpose. We've all got a story to share. We've all got a purpose. We can all make a difference in life. So, this section is about that. And then in the middle, I think it's worth sitting down and working through a whole bunch of stuff that kind of is your blueprint for how you want to show up in life. And then the 39 modules are kind of spread across those three things. I want to say how you want to show up in life. I mean, it's working out who you are. So who is Alex Clapp? You've got a powerful story. You've set up clarity. You do this, this, and this. But who is Alex Clapp? What makes him tick? What are his core values? I think understanding your 3 or 4 core values is the start of everything to be built on. It's incredible that I talk to people and they all say, well, I know what my core values are. And then after 2 or 3 sessions, most of them have changed through, simple curiosity, reflection, challenge, and conversation. But it's powerful, powerful stuff, Alex.
Yeah, no. Listen, and this is for me. This is exactly why I wanted to have this discussion with you today. And I wanted to help basically shine a light on you because I have this vision for clarity of providing as much choice and as many different options to as many different people as possible. And I love what you're doing, and I think you have got the opportunity to help an abundance of people. And as I always say, you will be the perfect fit for so many, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation today. Because it's about allowing people the option to go, well, actually, that sounds quite interesting. I'm a bit lost at the moment. I'm in a bit of a crossroads, or I'm feeling a bit stuck. I'm feeling a bit, I could just do with some different thought-provoking, questions, somebody to chat stuff through with, because ultimately it's a lot of the time it is easier to speak to a stranger than it is to speak to a loved one, a friend, or a family member, because they've already got an association and they've already got some form of background with you to look at it. It's sometimes a lot easier, and whether that's with what you're doing, whether it's with counselling, whether it's in rehabs, I am a massive advocate for finding what works for you. Find what works for you and use it to get the best version of you. And yeah, I love what you're doing. It sounds absolutely amazing. And I would say that if everybody in the world could spend, a week doing a load of the stuff with you, that the world would be a better place. I always say it about, if everybody could take 28 days out and do a month's work on themselves, the world would be a better place. And this is why I'm a huge advocate in the changes around mental health and people actually beginning to look inwards and being able to process thoughts, feelings, and actually, for me, the starting point is acknowledging that maybe there's something that I need to look at. That's the starting point for me, just maybe. And I say it around alcohol because I am never going to tell anybody not to drink, but always what I do say is ask yourself the honest question: that have you got a good relationship with alcohol? Are you one of the people, which there is millions of people in the world, that drink to be sociable and have a few drinks and love it, and then you can leave it, for another week, 2 weeks, whatever it may be? If that's you, that's fabulous. If you're the person that can have 1 or 2, 3 glasses of wine and go home and be content, that's absolutely fabulous. But if you're the person like I was, that nothing was ever enough, and I was like Pringles, that once that lid popped, there was no stopping me. It was nothing was ever enough then. And that's the honest conversation with myself.
Yeah. What's the phrase in AA? One is about drinks, one is too many, and 1,000's not enough.
Yeah. And it's very true. It's very true. So if we think about the workforce, we spend 2/3 of our lives at work.
Mm.
How do you think that companies can get better about, empowering their staff, supporting their staff, working with their staff around, improving their mental health? What's your thoughts?
Mm. Yeah, I think a whole bunch of things, but for me, the bottom line is, you know, people have basic human needs. I mean, Maslow tells us about that, doesn't he, in his hierarchy of needs? And that doesn't disappear just because you put a suit on and you turn up in a shiny office. So, people want to feel safe. They want to feel valued and listened to. They want to feel like they're being recognized for stuff they do. And I think there is good praise and bad praise, because if you've earned it and if you haven't earned it. People want to feel like they belong to something. And I think sort of moving above Maslow's basic needs, people in the workplace want to feel like they're making a difference. So they believe in what they do, they're motivated in what they do, and they can see the purpose of what they do. And when those things are true and they're delivering to that purpose, and they can see the difference they're making, the sense of meaning they get is like, wow. And that goes for life in general, whether you're in the workplace or not. I think that sense of meaning delivered through purpose is vital. But of course, you've got to see. I think all of that is based in values. Now, your personal values might be different to your company values, and that's where maybe a bit of work is needed just to kind of find some sort of understanding or compromise. Um, but if I'm going off a little bit of a tangent here, Alex, but there's some research done by Gallup, who are world renowned company that do surveys and polls and that type of thing. Well, they've been doing one on the workplace, worldwide survey. I think it started in 2012, and the data was I think it's refreshed annually, but the last data set I saw was 2023. And it says that in the UK, and most other countries are similar, but the UK is quite bad. In a league table in Europe, the UK is nearly at the bottom of 50 or 60 countries. The level of engagement in the workplace in terms of people describing themselves as loving their jobs, that is 10%. So 10% of the UK workforce say they love their jobs. 20 odd percent hate it and they've switched off, which means the fat majority are just basically waiting for the weekend or 5 o'clock each day. And that, I think, is a pretty sad state of affairs. If we can't design a workplace that's better than that, it's a sad state of affairs. Now, underpinning all of that, and I won't bore you with all the provenance of this data, but we know through studies that have been replicated hundreds and hundreds of times that by the time kids are 18, more than 50% have had a significant trauma. The real number is probably a lot more than that, because this study only has 10 different traumas in it, and clearly there are many other things that could happen. So if you look in the office or a cafe or your sports club or wherever you are, and you think 50% of these at least have had at least one trauma, most of them are bringing that to work silently. So it's like we were saying earlier, what's going on inside them is unseen, but it's hurting them, and it will be impacting their behaviors. So that's the basis. Add then on the fact that we've designed workplaces that mean only 10% on average. And of course, the problem again is, well, my company's not that. Oh, it can't be us. How do you know? Have you found out? As a combination, that just is an unhappy environment. So the two main reasons for the the lack of engagement, or the dissatisfaction in the workplace, are toxic work environments and a lack of meaning, a lack of a sense of, well, I don't really know, I don't know what my job really, I don't know how it makes a difference to anybody. So, that toxic work environment, lack of meaning, is broadly driving that lack of engagement. So my view is all of those things can be solved. We can help people overcome the trauma by giving them insights and tools to do that. We can certainly clear out toxic environments if you've got, buy-in from the exec, and there should be buy-in, because the numbers that fall off, if you've got an engaged workforce, you've got high performance, higher profits, higher turnover, higher share prices, and there's loads of data to support that. So it's worth doing, even if you're just motivated by numbers. And a lack of sense of meaning, well, I think you can work on that to truly understand what the difference is that your job does, both upstream and downstream, and to stakeholders within and outside of the company. Now, if you still end up with a position of, I still don't know what difference my job makes, maybe you need another job. I mean, let's be open and honest about it. So what does all that mean? Well, it means there are some clear problems, and I think there are some clear solutions to those problems. But it takes a little bit of thought and a little bit of work. But I think you can change all of those problems really quite quickly. And the benefit is there in data. The benefit is there in terms of it's just the right thing to do. It feels like the right thing to do as a human being. Did all that make sense?
Yeah, it 100% makes sense. And I think this is where I am a massive advocate for that the change needs to start happening. The culture within the workforce needs to start happening. And it's not just about ticking boxes. If we want to truly invest in our staff, it's not about just ticking boxes. And I personally have had to change the way I run my businesses. And I was listening to some of your thoughts and thinking then, and I was thinking, I actually take the time, effort to explain to the staff why I ask them to do certain things, to explain to the staff why we need to do this, why we need to do that, and why it makes a difference. And, basically to have them buy into the whole company, why as a company we're doing this, our morals, our values, why as a company we want to basically make sure that we stand out, we provide something over and above all of our competitors. People understand that. People see the value. People understand that by doing what they do, they're actually adding value to the company, and it's empowering them to help them to understand why it's important, their job. And yeah, I was thinking, and it's beginning to change, is what I will say. We are just touching on the very edges of the change, and over the next 5 years, I truly believe that things are going to get better, and more people are going to be realizing what we need to do. But for me, all of this is about prevention, because ultimately we've both been to the end of the road, and it's a very dark, lonely, sad place. And it's incredibly difficult to help anybody at the end of the road. However, you spend 2/3 of your life at work, and as an employee, we have the responsibility of making sure that we look after our employees, and that we actually invest in their health, well-being, and some of that is mental health as well. And we have to be offering different choices, different ways, and be forward thinking. We can't be the old dinosaur ways of when you said before that the doctor told you so many years ago to you're going to have to suck it up and get on with it. I've heard the saying you're going to have to man up before, and it's like, well, hold on a minute. If you have got something severely troubling you and you need to speak to somebody, that is perfectly okay. no matter what anybody else says.
Mm.
And that's the change. That's the change. And it's about embracing the change. And it takes other leaders and other people in control of businesses to understand the change, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, and I agree with that. And you know, another key aspect of any job that feels worthwhile and enjoyable for most people is a level of autonomy. I'm giving you some freedom to do this, deliver this. We're both really clear on what you're delivering, but I'm giving you some freedom on autonomy to do that and do it well. And if there are any challenges or reasons you need to come and chat, then that's what I'm here for. That's my role as a leader. But I think what that also leads to is, good leaders are vital in companies, but we shouldn't just be teaching leadership to leaders. A leader's job is obviously this company purpose and the company strategy and deliverables, and the leader's job is to deliver those. But I think a good leader, rather than a manager, does that through getting the best out of his team. All the different people with the different skill sets and their different backgrounds and the different challenges and the different, passions. The leader helps drive the best out of that team. And I think part of that is the stuff we've talked about with autonomy and recognition and belonging and so on. But we should see leadership, I think. So if I said, here's design for life, what use is that to a company? Well, I think you could share that individually or probably in workshops maybe with your teams that you're leading, because what we're trying to do is get people curious about the really profound stuff in Design for Life, which is the profound stuff in life anyway, I think. And we're getting them to adopt self-leadership, really. So you work through this stuff and you're encouraging people to adopt an attitude of, I'm in charge here. This is my life and I'm in charge. My private life, my professional life, yeah, I'm working with people and for people, but I'm in charge and I'm going to be responsible for not only delivering to my role, but making sure I do it well and have a good time doing it as well. And that is self-leadership. So leadership, there's a famous saying, and I don't know who said it, is, before you think of leading a team, make sure you can lead yourself properly first. Well, I think that flows throughout the whole of an organization.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sorry, Alex, just to finish, a bit like building my own emotional health, and the reason I've got 39 modules in the Design for Life is I don't think it's not just about going on a leadership course and saying, well, I've been on this leadership course, and you're buzzing afterwards and then normal stuff happens and it's forgotten 2 weeks later. I see this growth through whether it's Design for Life personally or changing, culture in a business. It isn't as, it would be nice, but it isn't as simple as flicking a light switch. But if we think it more of a dimmer switch, where we just nudge and nudge and nudge, and this can happen over weeks and months, then, after a fairly short period of time, the overall change is much, much brighter and profound. But I think we have to accept it is going to be like a dimmer switch, and we have to take the responsibility or be accountable for grabbing that dimmer switch and doing the work that allows us to turn it up.
Yeah, because anybody and everybody can teach you, give you all the tools, can basically give you all the research, all the science and everything, but you still have to do some of the work yourself. You still have to put in the time, the effort. And it's like anything in life, you get out what you put in. If you're prepared to do the work and to basically put in the effort at basically processing, dealing with, challenging your thought processes, you will get a lot of benefit. you will get a lot of benefit. I have done a significant amount of work over the last 5 years on myself, continue to do so on a daily basis, and I benefit from that. I am the strongest, the best version of myself I have ever been in my life, and that's a great place to be. But it's took a lot of work, and it's took a lot of, basically, I don't know everything. I'm not right all the time, and I'm always learning, and I'm always willing to learn. I'm always willing to be challenged, look at things in a different way and continue to grow. I'm very conscious of the time, Dave, because we could chat all day and we could literally debate many things. I'm going to ask you for a couple of final words of wisdoms or takeaways for anybody listening, either or. It might just be something that you want to leave people with to think about.
If I used one sentence, it would be, wherever you are, whatever you think you're stuck with, change is possible. And I know it. I've lived it. Through overcoming trauma, overcoming alcohol addiction, leaving a well-paid corporate job to find one that I'm doing now, which is built out of passion and purpose, and to see the meaning that gives me, or to feel the meaning that gives me, is incredible. So wherever you are, whatever you're stuck with, I think change is possible.
I love that. Absolutely love that. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and speak and share your story. It's been really, really powerful. And if anybody wants to get in touch with Dave through LinkedIn, and yeah, honestly, he's a great guy. Reach out, use what he's got on offer, and yeah, a massive thank you, Dave.
Yeah, good to chat again, Alex, and thanks to Lauren for setting it up.